What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Now that the patch 5.4 notes are out, I'm here to give you my rundown and analysis of all the major changes that took place in today's patch, and it's actually a pretty big one, so let's get started. Starting with the major champion changes, of which there were a ton. Kallista's passive received a nerf in that it is now a little bit slower. This essentially makes her less mobile, and is a decent nerf I suppose, but I think she'll still be pretty strong as a lot of her other strengths are still present. And the nerf to Kassadin's ultimate range actually went through. I made a video talking about the change in detail, which will be linked in the outro, but overall this is definitely a massive nerf to Kassadin, and expect him to be a lot weaker. Katarina's passive now only procs if she dealt damage to the champion in the last 3 seconds, which is definitely a reasonable nerf, but it's not always going to matter in a lot of situations. 3 seconds is a fairly reasonable time, so I would expect Katarina to still be one of the strongest mid laners. Mordekaiser also received some pretty significant changes. The health costs on all of his spells were lowered, and he gained some major utility by being able to cast his W on allies and have him still gain the effects as well as the ally, and the range on his Q was increased too, while the damage on his W got reduced slightly. Clones with his ultimate also gain AD instead of AP now, and overall I think it's a reasonable buff to Mordekaiser. And whether or not this will make him viable is hard to tell, but it's definitely going to make him gain popularity in solo queue. Veigar also received some major changes in that his Q is now a skill shot that passes through one target, with higher range and lower cooldown. His W, E, and ultimate now all cost less mana and have a lower cooldown, while the AP ratio on his ultimate was lowered as well. His stun now has a larger range, but unfortunately now has a 0.75 second delay before appearing, similar to his W almost. Although the mana costs and cooldown buffs were nice, and definitely something Veigar needed, the delay on his stun is actually a massive nerf, and I'm really kind of disappointed with this change. It adds a huge element of counterplay to a stun that was already pretty hard to hit, which was one of Veigar's main problems in the first place. Overall, it looks like these changes as a whole are honestly a nerf, since the hit to the stun is just way too big, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. Overall, he'll probably stay about the same, maybe be a little bit weaker, as the compensation buffs are still at least a little bit reasonable, but because of the stun change, he's pretty much completely useless in competitive play. Xerath's stun now lasts for half a second less in its maximum duration, so it's a decent nerf to him, but it doesn't really hurt anything that makes him strong, as he still does have a stun that lasts for long enough for him to land his Q and W, so overall he'll still be pretty strong. And lastly, in the champion changes, Zilean received some huge changes. A nerf to his attack range, but buff to his auto attack particle speed, as well as a buff to his base armor. In addition, his time bomb is now a skill shot with more range and less damage than before. However, now if you land a double bomb on someone, it stuns them for a second and a half, which is actually pretty good. His W no longer affects the cooldown of his ultimate, which is a big nerf though. His E now slows for more at higher ranks and has a smaller cooldown and smaller duration, while his ultimate has a much shorter cooldown as a whole and a shorter duration for it to proc. Overall, these changes were pretty significant, but I think what will happen is that it makes Zilean's support incredibly strong actually, now that he has a stun and his slow is much more potent. And so his kit as a whole does much less damage, so I would expect to see him fade out of mid lane, but it has much more crowd control, so expect Zilean to come back into the game as a support champion. I know that I'll definitely try him out. And moving on, the basic jungle items now cost 225 gold to switch instead of 0 gold. Once again, I am a little bit disappointed with this change, as it really hurts some of the lower tier junglers who had to use Devourer early and then switch in order to keep up in the jungle. Honestly, this really doesn't hurt most of the junglers who are already strong, who wouldn't be switching items anyways, so it's kind of just a nerf to like the tier 2 and lower junglers. In addition, Smite had its range reduced by 150, so it's a nerf to Stalker's Blade, as well as it makes it a bit harder to run up and steal jungle camp since the range isn't as high. Expect the Devourer enchant to be bought a tiny bit more, but the Chilling Smite is still definitely decent, but the fact that the range is lowered on it is actually really significant for chasing. Also, Revive has been removed from the game. RIP Revive, but honestly, it's not going to be missed, since it was never really viable anyways. There's also some new locked camera options. Try them out for yourself, and then they create some pretty interesting options when switching between locked and unlocked camera. And lastly, DJ Sona is out, so expect to see a lot of people playing her, as well as it being a tiny buff to champions like Leona and Blitzcrank, who do a great job of countering her in lane. My name is Jeremy, and that's it for my video on patch 5.4. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button so I can tell, and be sure to check me out over on all the socials, of which you can see on your screen. And if you really enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for some more awesome content in the future, or check out some of my other videos on your screen as well. And above all else, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.